One of the things that's been I guess you could say like a good sign when it comes to this sculpture that I've been working on of Charlie Kirk is that the comments, you know, there's a lot of good comments, a lot of people that support the project, a lot of people that recognize the tragedy of a husband and father being taken from his family at such a young age and for political reasons. There's been a lot of that, but there's also been those that view kind of any mainstream person on the right as the enemy, as a bad person, evil person. But one thing I've noticed is that I've been going along, and even the haters, the people that don't like the person, you know, if somebody's a hater and you're an artist, they'll use every opportunity to critique and, you know, make fun or try to diminish the skill of your art. And I noticed that hasn't been the case so much with this one, so I must be getting to a likeness. Though it's not quite there yet, I definitely like to continue to develop the forms, but I notice that I get less of, or those that don't like that I'm doing this sculpture are more concerned with pointing out why they think that he was a bad guy rather than that it doesn't look like him. So that means that if they could critique the art, they would critique the art, but they can't. So they critique something that they can, which is just a worldview. But even that, they're wrong about. Charlie Kirk was right about more than they. And having had the opportunity to, you know, work on this and build it up, it's made me, you know, realize, I think as it has a lot of people, especially fathers and husbands, just how lucky they are, especially those of us that are in the stage of life where we have little kids at home. How blessed I am to be able to hold them and to be alive right now and be able to watch them grow. And when you see that taken from somebody, it does, well, I think it raises righteous anger, but then it also makes you think about how grateful you are that you're there with your kids when somebody else who deserves to be there, who should be there for his kids, is not able to because he passed on. keep pushing and pulling this, the cheekbones and the shape of the head. It's hard to get exactly right, but these features were a distinct part of his likeness. What a time to be alive. I really don't like that we're living in a time where people have branded true statements as hateful. We've gotten a lot of that Charlie Kirk was hateful for opposing certain things or for promoting other things. They'll talk about that. Somebody commented that he was against women's rights, and I said, well, what rights are that? What rights are those? What rights did he want to take away from women? And do a little bit of digging, and it turns out the rights that he's talking about, the quote-unquote rights, are the ability for women to kill their own son or daughter in the womb, which is something that, of course, is not a right, because a right is something like nobody has a right to execute another human being. Nobody has a right to do wrong. That's not what rights are. Rights are the things that you have a claim against somebody else, and nobody has a claim to the life, to an innocent human being, to the life of an innocent human being. You can't make that claim, not even the mother. So it's the responsibility of mothers and fathers to protect and defend their children, and the right to end the life of children is a right that doesn't exist, because rights, if they exist, as they were conceived and expressed by the founders of the United States, rights are endowed by our Creator, by nature's God, is how they framed it. So nature's God, that's where rights come from, because of the fact that we were created in the image of God, that created with certain rights that are those things that supersede the government, that go above and beyond the government. And the government has no right to infringe on certain human rights. But that's a religious claim. That's a claim that can only be founded on a religious belief, because it's a claim that there's something above material, something above governments, above people, that there's some like right out there that you have to the freedom of speech, for example, to say what you believe to be true. Somebody's saying, "What's up? Bro, I watch you like all the time." Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You've already got a good likeness. Need to see your process. Thanks. I appreciate that. Amazing sculpt, somebody says. Thank you. Yeah, it's coming along slowly. Let me actually put on, I like to have videos, even if they're just silent here in the, so I can kind of watch the facial expressions of Charlie as I'm sculpting. Who is it? It's read in the title. It's Charlie Kirk, who was recently assassinated. Somebody made the point that it's the second the second political martyr in American history, the second Christian martyr in American history, the first being Joseph Smith, who also was getting into politics. He was, he founded the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he was actually running for president when he was martyred. He was killed. So, interesting. And then people celebrated his martyrdom too, Joseph Smith's, as well as Charlie Kirk's. And they said that because he was a bad guy, therefore he deserved to be killed. That's, it's a very similar thing. Very similar, though there's a lot of people on the right that would say that it's totally different, but I think that there's a lot of similarities. Yeah, Joseph Smith was the first presidential candidate to be assassinated as a candidate, which is kind of interesting, American history. Are you LDS? Yeah, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So in my bio it says Christian LDS in parentheses, which I believe the assassin also came from an LDS family, though he'd since left the church and was a member of like several, or at least one that I heard about, ex-Mormon groups, or they call themselves ex-Mormon, but we that are members of the church refer to ourselves as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because we don't want to take the focus away from Christ, of our church. Focuses on Christ. But yeah, he was like, I think there was one that was like ex-Mormon furries or something, that the killer was part of that group. So it's interesting. There's a lot of, like, I'm the same age roughly as Charlie. I was born a little bit earlier in the same year, 1993. But then I went to the same university as the killer. I went to Utah State University. I think the killer was, I think the assassin went there for like a semester and then dropped out or something. And then yeah, it's just, and then I lived most of my life in Utah, where he was, the state where he was killed, where Charlie was killed. What are your thoughts on the furries? Well, it's just another fetish, I think. Somebody says, nice, I am too. Oh, another member of the church out there. Interesting. The furries, well, I think it's just another, it's like another play offshoot of transgenderism, which just says that the truth doesn't really matter and you can kind of be whatever you want to be. And I don't buy into that philosophy. I think we have certain responsibilities as men and women, and that men shouldn't act like women and women shouldn't act like men and people shouldn't act like animals. I think that's a fairly reasonable position, though I guess there's a lot of people that would disagree and say that that's a what would they say? That I have no right to comment on other people's self-expression. But of course, that's not true. We do have a right to comment on the society we live in and the choices that individuals make, especially when it becomes public, when they want to exhibit those things in public. Then everybody has a say in the type of society that we want to live in, the type of behaviors we want to promote, and the things we want to discourage, and whether that's through the law, but I think just as good of a deterrent or a better deterrent is just social pressure. Because if people are pressured to behave well, that's better than the government having to come down and force behavior through government mandate. I would rather that people choose on their own to be moral and upright and, not be criminals, not be violent. But then if they start, then the law does have a role to come in and protect the life, liberty, and property of innocent people that are affected by the poor choices of others. But yeah, it seems like the person was into all sorts of weird sex stuff, as Michael Knowles would say. Just all kinds of deviant behavior, and then felt that somebody like Charlie Kirk speaking out against some of those things. I don't even think Charlie Kirk was the main, the most inflammatory voice against that. I think he was pretty mild when it came to his criticisms of things like transgenderism and other things. I mean, he was very much opposed to the medical transitioning of children, which I think any sane person can agree with that children should not be medically treated in such a way that will alter their bodies in an irreversible way when they're young. They can't really understand what they're doing. Can't really fully understand, because when you're young, you can't really understand what it means to be permanently sterile or to never have sexual function in your organs. You don't even understand what that means. You don't even get it. And so, you can't possibly consent to something that you don't understand, and you can't understand it when you're young. You can't understand the details of being an adult. I'm 15 and see furries in my school all the time. Yeah, well, it should just be against the dress code. There should be a dress code. That's just crazy that they would allow people to act like animals. We're not animals. We shouldn't pretend to be animals. And so that's just one more reason why I homeschool my kids, because I don't trust the people that are in charge of the institutions like the schools. Seems like they're just too crazy. And kids, they'll do whatever you allow them to. If you say, oh, you can dress up, in a Halloween costume every day in school, and, to a lot of people that sounds fun, and no wonder people want to do it if you let them. But it's not a good thing to allow people to allow kids to begin to identify with, animalistic parts of themselves. We shouldn't act like animals. It shouldn't be too controversial. We're not we're not merely animals. It's always good to meet church members who also do sculpture. Yeah, there's quite a few actually. Leroy Transfield, one of my favorite sculptors. He's really talented. I started a sculpture group with Leroy Transfield, Joseph Brickey, who's another sculptor in Utah, and Jason Millward. And there's a bunch of other Utah sculptors that are members of the church. There's also somebody that reached out to me, who's a sculptor in California, does more comic book stuff. Eric, oh man, his last name's, he'd be upset with me that I'm blanking on his name, but yeah, there's a lot of talented sculptors of us out there, which is interesting, you know, because we're not a huge segment of the world. I guess in Utah it makes sense, but I was surprised how many really, really talented sculptors there were in Utah. Talented. Something that was interesting when I was sculpting this is that at the beginning I wanted to have it be more of a serious expression, like kind of, you know, almost like stern or serious, kind of like almost like Trump's, what was his presidential portrait, very serious, stern. Not based on that. I'm just saying I wanted it to be serious, and that comes to mind as like a serious kind of, he was like no nonsense portrait. That's what I had in mind at the beginning, but then as I was sculpting, it just seemed like the expression without trying just seemed to be a lot happier of an expression. And my wife mentioned that there was a video. I didn't see the video, but my wife mentioned it to me that when she saw it, she thought about me talking about this, that I was trying to make him serious, but it ended up being more of a pleasant, almost smile on his face. And then she mentioned that there was a video of his wife saying that when she, if I have the story correct, that when she saw him, that it almost seemed like he was smiling even after he'd passed, that he was just such a happy person, that like that's just the way he was. So I thought that was an interesting thing, and I think it's you know, I think there's, you know, God has his hand in all kinds of things that we don't really see it, or sometimes our own designs just don't do the thing justice. And then I want to exaggerate some of the features, like the cheekbones, but he had a really rounded face. Oh man, I see a wasp inside the studio space. Well, I heard it first. Now I see it. I really don't like wasps. They can be outside, but when they come in here, I take it personal. Got him. Eric Sosa, that's who it was. Eric Sosa, yeah, that's who I was thinking of. Yeah, that's also a member. Just wondering what type of reference material are you using for this sculpt? Yeah, I can show you. Well, I have some just pictures, but then also in the background I'm playing a video. Let me make sure that the zoom is correct on this. One sec. So I have video in the background that kind of gives me a 3/4 view, and I can, try to use that. And then I also have just pictures that I've set aside. Some of these I even put up on the screen earlier. Let me show some of these. So like this one was a big one for the side view. Getting the side view is really important, and the nose and everything. This one's not as detailed as I would have liked. This one was, at the beginning, I used a lot. This one was really helpful for just the shape of the head. You can see that it's very, very straight on, probably a camera that was way far back and really zoomed in. So there's a lot less distortion. And so that one's the one that I use a lot. In fact, maybe I'll even just leave this. Oh, whoops. Maybe I'll just leave this one up and make it a little bit smaller, because it'll also help while I'm working. His brow really came forward. I think it's not so much that he had deep eye sockets, it's that the angle of the brow to the inside part of the eye socket is very abrupt. So this one's really coming down, and then it's a really sharp transition from here down to the eye sockets, which I think gave the appearance of deeper eye sockets, but I don't think it's as much that. It's just that it's a really sharp plane change, and it makes that, when the light hits, feels like it comes in quite a bit. And I feel like it's a little bit. I'm 15, I see furries in my school all the time. That was an earlier comment. That's, yeah, that's crazy. That was not a thing when I was in school. But then transgenderism also wasn't a thing, so I guess it's all new stuff. Amazing likeness, you're very talented. Thanks, I appreciate that. It's coming slowly. I feel like I have to be careful with things like this right here. because the transition is it's really soft. He had, he had some softness in his face, some of the fat pads, but it was all pretty soft. So I don't want to make his face too rugged with the separation between those forms. Felt like it was getting on the path of being too rugged, too like chiseled in a way, where it's like bodybuilders that have a really low fat percentage, their face starts to, the separation between the forms of their face really starts to come forth, or just as you get older, the fat pads kind of separate. But he had a fairly soft face, so I don't want to overdo this. These features. So it's a lot of blending, softening. I turn this here just to see that a little bit. Yeah, I feel like here that I pushed his cheekbones out a little bit too much down here. What I'm worried about is just moving away from the likeness that I've been trying so hard to establish. Sometimes as you get further along, you start making things worse instead of better, and I'm trying not to do that. Let me switch lenses. I actually like I have another 85mm lens that's a little bit more zoomed in, and I like the look of that a little bit better for these live streams. So I'm just gonna switch that. The camera that I'm recording on is the Lumix S5. I really like it, and it's like a budget camera, especially now. You can get it used for really reasonable. One of the best cameras you can get for its price. And it's old now. They have newer versions of this type of camera. This will allow me to get just a little bit more zoomed in. I'm gonna change some of the settings a little bit to get more in focus. This way I can overlay the two images again and just do a quick side-by-side comparison. I'm just going to put it right on top. This is what I did a lot at the beginning. That way I can just see, switch back really quickly. I think the yeah, there's still some things that need to be changed. Let me see, it feels like the nose comes down a little bit further, the tip of the nose. Comes down a little bit further. Hand is a little bit wider. Yeah, a little bit wider. It feels like this was a little bit more narrow, a little bit more flat right here. I'm gonna change this a little bit just to get it better aligned. The sculpt, maybe not that. Let's do different blending mode. Let's do screen. That's better. I do feel like I'm moving away from the likeness that I had. That's annoying. That frequently happens. Gotta get that back. that back. What clay are you using? Somebody's asking. This is just dollar store non-dry modeling clay. Comes in a bunch of different colors. It's like an oil and wax-based clay. And I just mix together all the colors except for the darkest two, which are black and purple. Those are really dark colors, and I take those out just so it's not so dark. This is kind of a dark brown, but it would be even darker if it was everything in the clay. Oh, come on. Yeah, let's do this. Feel like that nose comes down just a little bit more. Face. Build out the bottom. It's difficult using this this particular image as well because it's a different focal length than my camera, which is something that it's kind of hard to understand, but the closer you get to somebody, the more the features in front are going to be exaggerated. Like if I'm right here, you know, right next to it, the nose looks really large and then the ear's really small. And the camera that was used to take this reference photo was way back. This is probably like a, you know, one of those cameras that can zoom to like 800 millimeters or like 1600 millimeters. So you can zoom way back and then you can zoom way in. And the problem with that is when you switch to an 85, while an 85 is still zoomed in quite a bit, it's still kind of a lens that's more zoomed in, it will distort things a little bit. And so you can't always just copy everything one-to-one because of things like those focal lengths. And so it's not as, you know, it's not an easy thing. If you think getting a likeness is easy, I mean, just try it with anybody and you'll see that it's a very, very difficult task, but it is possible. And I'm just trying to get closer and closer to that. But it's not an easy thing. Love that trick that you're doing with overlaying the pictures. Is that a specific piece of software you're using? This is just Just OBS. So it's just a live streaming software, and you can take an image and just drop it right on top and then switch back and forth. So yeah, if you're doing a sculpture of your own, you might consider just putting it in this software, hooking up a camera, and then being able to check it real time. Because it does kind of put it in a different light. Let's see, yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's getting too thick in these areas. It's hard because I'm also using several different photos. This is just one, but this appears to be one where he's a little bit, just a little bit younger. In some of the other ones, he's gained a little bit of weight, which is typical when you become a dad. Usually, your hormones change, which tends to take away some of the natural testosterone. I've heard that you lose a little bit of testosterone to become, more kind to the kids, I suspect, so that you're not so aggressive. Testosterone is a big, makes you more aggressive, which is right, like the roid rage that you hear about. Or I don't know if you've heard about it, but that's like a common thing that people taking synthetic testosterone will often be very easily upset or more aggressive. And so I don't want to, so it's hard, and I'm trying to get a likeness not just from, one time, but from his life, his whole life. So I'm trying to kind of put it all together and get as I'm working on the likeness. Let's look at the side view, and let me do this a little bit as well. So I'm actually going to turn the camera a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing from the side, because we do have another. Maybe I'll back up just a little bit. Actually, I'm going to back up the camera as far back as I can get, and then I'll zoom in digitally on the camera, and that'll give me a closer focal length and hopefully a little bit less distortion, hopefully a little bit closer to some of the reference images that I have. So let me do that. think that will help. And then, so yeah, I guess the Wi-Fi that I was using, that's why it kept disconnecting the sound on an earlier live stream. The sound just kept disconnecting. And I think now that it's, I guess I was using the same frequency with the audio receiver as the Wi-Fi or something like that. That was a problem that Grok said it might be. And it looks like it's fixed, so I just switched to 5G Wi-Fi, and then it seems to not be disconnecting like it was. So hopefully the audio is a little bit better because of that. Let me see, what were the, so let's flip this picture. We're going to, flip horizontal. There we go. And we're just going to put this right up against. This isn't a perfect one, but it should give us a little bit. Let me change the blending mode to change a little bit. Let's do, let's see, I'm gonna crop this. We don't need it too much. That way I can put it right over top. Might need to rotate it just a little bit. Or I guess I could rotate my, I guess I could lift my sculpture up a little bit. Is that what maybe would help? But it is really these visual that's rotated a little bit different than what I have. Needs to be a little bit smaller. It does need to be rotated. Let me see if I can rotate it. Have a way. I don't know if there's a way to rotate the image in OBS. I guess I can, maybe I can lift this up a little bit. I think the sculpture would need to be lifted slightly. Let me see if I set it. Let me see if that. Oh no, that's the wrong way. Needs to go the other way. And I don't want to tip it this way, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. I'll just put this, well, I'll just leave it where it is. Let me switch the blending mode, normal. Even though it's not going to be perfectly aligned, this should hopefully just give me some. I don't like that. What is going on? So it looks like those eyes, or the eye socket itself, needs to be pulled forward. Feels like the whole face needs to be longer, but I'm trying to see if that's trying to see where that needs to happen. Man, that's frustrating. It does feel like something's, like some structural stuff is off, which is frustrating at this stage, but there's nothing to do but just make those changes and keep going. So I feel like the length to height ratio, that this is coming back too far. That's why it makes it feel like it's too squished, too squat. That the whole thing needs to be lengthened, and I think a lot of that is the mass that's back here. Because I could just put more clay on the chin, and lengthen everything, but then I change a lot of what I've been working on in the face, and maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe I just need to remove some of what's happening in the back and work on those proportions that way. Make this smaller. Yeah, I do feel like I've lost that profile likeness, and that won't do. Which means that I am gonna move things around, and so hate to do it, but I feel like it needs to happen. So we're gonna be redoing a lot of these features. Pushing the chin in a little bit. Lengthening it. This is something that I tell students, that you got to be willing to make big changes even when you feel like you like what's happening. But if you see something that's off, probably is. And here I see quite a few things that are off, even the mouth, which I was liking. And so I'm gonna, let me keep working on that back of the head, because I think that's still a little bit large. And then once I get that, then I'll come back. Let me rotate this image because I don't want to be, I feel like I am going a bit far. And I feel like it's not lined perfectly. So let me take the image, that side view image, and rotate it a little bit, at least in camera. So let's see. So I took it on my camera and rotated a little bit. You can see that that it's a little bit more rotated because I didn't like that the angle was just slightly off. I could tell by the ears that the angle I was observing was not exactly, or the tilt of the head was not exactly matching. So I didn't want to. That tilt is better. See how the ears are, I don't know if you can see that, but I can see how the ears are matching better. Oh yeah. Matching better, but I still see the same things, but that's good. At least now I'm more in line with where it should be. So I'm seeing that the chin needs to come down about, let's see if I move the chin down that much, does that feel right? Let's change the, and then this also to come down a little bit. Things need to be lengthened a little bit, so I'm just going to pull this down by adding some clay here. Oh, whoops, you can't see what I'm doing. Adding some clay down here, bottom of the chin, pushing that down. Mouth needs to be moved down a little bit. This is the process. If you want to get a likeness, you gotta be willing to move things around quite a bit. Let me see how we're doing. Okay, and then the ear needs to come forward quite a bit more. Actually, it's not that much. Somebody says hi, hello, welcome. Just working. Whoops, not that one. This one. Okay, come on, we got this. Nothing wrong with redoing some of this. If better to redo it now than to get even more detailed and then have to redo it then. Nothing wrong with redoing a part of the sculpture. Just gives you even more practice and you get even better. Let me actually move this this one back just a little bit. Because I feel like it was really pressing up too close. His forehead has quite a slope back. It's not like a, it's not like a cliff this way. It's really pushing back. Ooh. So I want to push things back over here. Yeah, it's definitely pushing back. And then the eye. I did a lot of work on the eyes, so that's it's unfortunate, but it definitely does need to come forward. So I'm gonna have to redo that work on the eyes. Yeah, they're just too deep in the socket. They're too deep back there. And then they need to come forward more of this part, which means I need to redo a lot of stuff. But that's how it goes. I want it to be excellent. I want to pursue excellence in this one. Which means I've got to be willing to fix things when they're wrong. I feel like I worked on the other side a lot, and now I'm just focusing on this side, but I think it'll be worth it by the end because there was a lot that needed to be fixed. I guess the portrait's getting even just a little bit bigger. Yeah, that shape of the head is just a little bit off. Somebody says I try to make the lumen's head. Is that the Loomis head maybe? That's good. That's a great exercise. It's tricky. The head shape is tricky. The portrait, I mean the head in general, the portrait is one of the most difficult things that you can attempt to create, and so just realize that that's part of it. It's going to be difficult. It's a difficult thing to do. And yeah, I gotta move the mouth, don't I? Yep. I kind of liked what was happening with the mouth, but the reference doesn't care. This is one of those days where it's gonna look a little bit, looks like I'm making it a little bit worse. But sometimes that's required when you need to structurally move things. You gotta fix some of the things, even some of the things that maybe you liked, but they're just not in the right place. This isn't digital sculpting where we can just, select an area and then move it around in 3 dimensions. You have to redo basically the whole thing, which is why ideally you'd get it right in the first place, but I'm not a perfect sculptor. Yeah, that's getting way worse. Oh, Heavenly Father, help me. Yeah, I'm making big changes. But that's what's required when there's things that are off. You gotta make big changes. Hi, Andrew. Greetings from Germany. It's so weird. I only knew Charlie from the internet, but he had such a huge impact on me. When I heard he was killed, I cried the next 3 days. Yeah, he was, I was kind of had a similar thing where it's like something that I felt like the death of somebody that I've never met in person, like never known, like you wouldn't think it would affect you, but it did. It affected a lot of people, and I think we see a friend, a father, husband, and it's devastating. But it is, it is interesting that somebody that I'd never met could have such an emotional impact. The death of somebody to have such an emotional impact. On so many people, people all over the world. That is incredible what he was able to accomplish in such a short time frame. Yeah, I'm moving things like crazy, so this is going to be one of those sessions where it gets a lot worse before it gets better, but I think I had some, even though I was starting to get a likeness, I think I had some structural issues and it wasn't going to be as good as I wanted it to be, and so that means making big changes and moving things around, and unfortunately that means you're going to have to start over with some of these features, or I'm going to have to, but that's just how it goes. Somebody says he had potential to be president of the United States one day. Oh yeah, I think a lot of people knew that he would be president, if he had the chance. There's no one who was more politically successful at a younger age that had done more politically than him. He started something that became a huge movement, Turning Point USA. There's just no comparable person anywhere else in politics. He was just a force, and I think he definitely would have been president if he'd lived to have the chance. I wonder if the photo is just a little bit more turned. Yeah, that's too bad. I got to redo the mouth, redo a lot of the eyes. That's too bad. But that's how it goes. When I turn this to the front, you'll see that I lost a lot of the likeness that I was working on, but those features were not lining up from the profile view, and I really do want this to be an accurate sculpture. Muy buenas noches, alguien dice. Good evening. Buenas noches. Okay, let's see. It's definitely closer from the side than it was, but yeah, that is too bad. I'll need to start over with a lot. I'll try to make an 11-inch tall Charlie sculpture. I've never tried to sculpt likeness, but I'll try. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's I think would be a great thing to try. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So you can see that the likeness from the front view has really been shattered because of that. So that's unfortunate, but that's how progress goes. Sometimes you two steps forward, one step back. Let me flip this. Sounds like family's home. Need to be cutting this. Careful, there's the camera right there. How's it going? Okay. Okay. Are we gonna eat? Sculpting. Okay, let me finish up with this and then I'll come in, okay? Let me just put a couple more things. Oh my goodness, thank you. Careful. Okay, I'll come in just a sec. Okay, well, today is one of those days where it got worse instead of better, which is unfortunate, but sometimes when your proportions are off, especially from the side profile, then it's just better to start fresh. And so looks worse, looks less like him, but by the end, the changes that I made today will make a big difference in getting it actually to look like him. So that's just part of the process. But I'll continue to work on it. It'll be good by the end. Probably next time I'll turn it back to the front, work on the front again, but the side view, there was quite a few things that were very much off that needed to be fixed. So, hey James, how you doing, buddy?
Teddy.
Oh, you got a teddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Okay, should we go inside?
Yes.
Okay.